Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel, and this short video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous night of the local time. One of the most important updates is coming from Chernihiv and Sumy area. According to information we have, the Russians started artillery preparation in the northern Ukrainian regions, and most likely after the finishing of artillery preparation, the Russians will begin, another waves of offensive operation with the purpose to establish the second and the third front lines on the northern direction, with the purpose to stretch the Ukrainians' reinforcements and reserves and not to allow them to concentrate their forces in Kharkiv area. Now let's move to Kharkiv direction. The Ukrainians during the previous 24 hours continue bombing and attacking Belgorod with significant number of missiles, projectiles, multiple launch rocket systems, lots of explosions, lots of casualties, and lots of damage the Ukrainians managed to deal. Now let's move to the line of combat contact. We have additional updates and additional, reports from the ground, from the villages by the name of Hlyboke and Lukiantsi. We have one geolocation confirming the Russian progress in the area. For example, on this video we can see the concentration of Russian soldiers along this tree line, which confirms that the Russians managed to get at least here. But when talking about different sources, according to information we have, the Russians, as a result of offensive operation by this morning, before I start making the video, have already established complete control over the village by the name of Lukiantsi, this one. So according to the Russians, they managed to move even further and to capture the village. For now, this report wasn't confirmed by any geolocation, but when talking about the Ukrainian deep state mappers, they confirmed the Russian progress, and they confirmed that the clashes were taking place during the previous night in Lukiantsi as well as in the village by the name of Hlyboke. Furthermore, the deep state have already updated their map, showing the same thing, that in Lukiantsi there are very heavy clashes and Hlyboke is in the gray zone. So if we summarize everything, we can make a conclusion that currently, by the morning of the 13th of May, the Russians control something like this. The Russians control Hlyboke. The Russians control the tree lines and the forest belt between Hlyboke and Lukiantsi, and the Russians control Lukiantsi and Zelene, the village that located to the, southeast of the village by the name of Lukiantsi. So this is the current situation according to, different mappers, but for now without any geolocations. Furthermore, other Russian sources reported that as a result of offensive operation, the Russians managed not just to establish complete control over Hlyboke, but to break through the Ukrainian defense belt and to answer Liptsi itself. So this information wasn't confirmed by any source, neither by mappers, different mappers, neither by Ministry of Defense. Just this information was confirmed by different sources on the ground. Of course, but it's most likely this is something like this, and so the Russians answered the first, storm squads entered the Liptsi, and the clashes are taking place right now already in this town. Furthermore, we got report from different sources, including Institute of Study of War, who says that if the Russians are able to establish control over Liptsi, then they will introduce additional forces on the ground and will start the full-scale offensive operation toward Kharkiv. So Liptsi is the focal point. It's the focal point for many reasons, and the reason is that if the Russians once again are able to capture Liptsi and Vysyola very fast, during the next few days, at least to reach this red line during the next few days, until the Ukrainians are able to redeploy a significant number of reinforcements on the direction with the purpose to stabilize the area. After that, the Russians will introduce additional forces. Furthermore, the Ukrainians are saying that the Russians have already concentrated significant number of forces along the border, but still haven't crossed the border, still haven't introduced them on the ground. So everybody is waiting at the end of the first wave of attack. And once again, the first wave of attack, at least on the western direction, is to take Liptsi and Vysyola. The Ukrainians, from their side, continue redeployment of reinforcements. We received during the previous night significant number of videos of, lots of armored vehicles, personnel carriers, soldiers, infantry and tanks who were heading towards the line of combat contact. The Ukrainians are bringing forces from different directions, from Kupiansk, from South Donetsk, from Avdiivka, from Kherson. So most likely Syrsky realized that this is not something like fake. This is a real full-scale offensive operation from the Russian side, with the purpose to establish complete control over Kharkiv. And everybody understand that if Kharkiv falls, then There are going to be no more special military operation because this is going to be the end. Now let's move to Vovchansk, where we also achieve a significant number of different updates, important and very, very interesting. First, let's start from the western flank of Vovchansk direction. According to information we have, the Russians managed to enter the village of Staritsa. We have different mappers already updated their maps, showing that the Russians managed to improve their forces, improve their positions, and almost to capture already 30% of this village. So the Russians are moving further, and as we discussed, the main Russian goal is to establish complete control over the, let's say, roads over Staritsa, over Burgovatka, and to reach Seversky Donetsk River. So this is the main Russian goal, and to force the Ukrainians to fall back. Now let's move to the eastern flank. This area is covered completely with the fog of war. Very difficult to understand what exactly is happening on this direction, because during the previous few days we got significant number of updates that the Russians established complete control over Zybina, that the Russians captured the village by the name of Tikha, but yet we haven't received neither confirmations from different mappers, neither confirmation from any, let's say, reliable source like Minister of Defense of Russian Federation. So that's why we are going to keep this area as a gray zone. When talking about Vovchansk itself, the Russians, according to different sources, managed to establish complete control over the Vovchansk, let's say, industrial zone and the garages here. This territory was captured by the Russians. The Ukrainians of 125th Brigade, who were responsible from this direction, published their own posts regarding the situation, telling that they were fighting till the last, let's say, soldier, till the last bullet. But the problem is that the Russians saw no resistance when they crossed the border. There were no minefields, no fortifications, nothing. Basically, the Russians started their engines, and when the fuel was out, they, let's say, stopped their engines of their armored vehicles, and they're stopped on the outskirts of Vovchansk itself. So the clashes continues. Currently, the Russians are already inside of the northern part of Vovchansk, and most likely the northern part will fall very soon. But this is not enough for the Russians. They need to capture entire Vovchansk, and this is going to be also the end of the first wave, of the first stage of Kharkiv offensive operation. After that, the Russians will introduce additional forces to the north, and they will continue moving further to the south in direction of Chuguyev and Kupiansk. So the first, let's say, the first wave, the first stage of Kharkiv offensive is clear to us, and this is to establish control over every single village and town and city that located to the north of this red line. It's Liptsi, Veselaya, Ternova, Staritsa, Burgovatka, Прилипка, Синельникова, Vilcha, Vovchansk, Vovchansky Hutory, Pokolyana, Karachina, and then further to the east. So this is the first stage, and Russians, as you can see, have already completed this mission for around 30%. Of course, the most difficult battles are ahead, but the Russians are moving, and most likely today we're going to receive additional updates about additional Russian progress on the direction. When talking about other, let's say, front lines, some interesting updates are coming from Chasiv Yar. The Ukrainians conducted a successful counterattack on Russian positions in the vicinity of Bogdanovka, and as a result of offensive, they managed to restore some positions, at least in the forest. So the Russians were trying to move on Ukrainian positions in Kalinovka, but those attacks were repelled, and Ukrainians conducted successful counterattack and restored positions over this area completely. Yet there were still no clashes in the eastern Chasiv Yar. The sources reported about additional Russian progress in Klishchevka, but yet without any confirmations or any updates confirming this. Now let's move to Keramik, to Avdiivka, to Donetsk direction, where the Russians continue clashes, continue offensive, and the most important updates are coming from the village, the area between Berdichi, Semenovka, and Orlovka. The Russians started moving further to the west, maintaining the gray zone and forcing the Ukrainians to fall back further to the west in direction of Karlovka water reservoir. So according to different mappers, the Russians captured just additional 3 lines on this direction. Now let's move to the south in direction of South Donetsk. We have a lot of updates. Krasnogorovka, no changes, no updates during the previous 24 hours, and neither no confirmations of Russian control. But very interesting details are coming from Konstantinovka, Novomikhailivka, and I expect that soon this front line will collapse under the Russian pressure. during the previous 24 hours, this morning more precisely, we got significant number of different posts from official Telegram channel of 79's air, let's say a separate air mobile brigade, and they reported that the situation is difficult, that the Russians managed to improve their positions in further to Paraskoevka and Konstantinovka. Then they reported that the commander of their brigade considers of sending some squads to Kharkiv, as we discussed in the previous update, and they're saying that they have some insufficiency of soldiers as well, so they don't know who to send and what is going to happen after they send additional forces. Later we got a report that the situation is very difficult on the 79th Brigade, and they reported that the Ukrainian commanders decided to, let's say, to change the routes of munition supply, and they're saying that now the 79th Brigade is receiving less ammo, less bullets, less weapon to direction, because the main traffic currently is heading to Kharkiv, and they have nothing, and if the Russians start, they don't know what to use to repel another Russian attack. So, and also they added that there are going to be no reinforcements, because currently the reinforcements is heading to Kharkiv. So this is the thing that most of the military experts are talking right now. The Ukrainians realized that the Russian attack on Kharkiv and Sumy, possible Sumy and Chernigov direction, is not a joke, and that the Russians will attack, and now they try to send everything they have exactly on this direction. And this situation leads to, let's say, reduction of supply and support of Ukrainians all over the line of combat contact. And according to military experts, this situation may lead to collapse of defense belt of Ukrainian armed forces on many directions, which will allow the Russians to improve their positions. Now let's move to Russia. We got also a very important update. According to information we have, Putin is going to dismiss Shoigu, the Minister of Defense of Russian Federation, who's been taking his position for a very long time, probably for the previous maybe 5, 6, 7 years, I don't remember for sure. He will be replaced by another person, Belousov, and after that Shoigu will be the Secretary of the National Security. He'll get this position, but this is something like retired position. You know, the same as Zaluzhny. He was, let's say, commander-in-chief of armed forces of Ukraine, but then he was sent as an ambassador to United Kingdom. So he was sent for retired. He was retired like this way, like getting interesting position in the United Kingdom. So the same story with Shoigu. It's like not changing of position. It's just the way how the person would be retired by and go to on the pension. So this is the situation. About other important things, Lavrov is going to remain on his position. He's not going. He will be reappointed according to information we have, and the most important, the head of general staff of the armed forces of Russian Federation, Gerasimov, also will be reappointed on his position. So just Shoigu from the big, let's say, office, president office of Putin, probably just Shoigu will be dismissed or replaced or moved to another position. This is very important changes, and this will also affect the let's say, the process and the entire process of special military operation. And that's it for the short video. Military Summary channel reminds that we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes to my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.